Hello and welcome. My name is Rado, and for the last 3 years I've been restoring this 1979 Saab 96 V4. Continuing with gearbox, we're on a pinion shaft assembly. The first bearing from the pinion is no longer available, so that's the replacement with the closest dimensions that I could find. It is a bit different in its construction, so it doesn't have this snap ring holding it on a side-to-side motion, rather than it uses this separate ring, and the rollers in the bearing are divided with some elastomer, so they're not rubbing against each other. I think it will be more durable. Let's press this in. You have to make a few pipes to press this in. Yep. It is tight fit, so hydraulic press, the best tool for the job here. And then you got this first gear. It is factory marked with this X. You can see here in right corner. So this corner, this side goes against the bearing. It is very tight fit, so you have to really push it. It goes on, well, rather tightly. By the way, I love this sound when you can just hear that it's moving. So for the assembly, the jig I've replicated from photos in service manual. This overhaul is rather undoable without it. So I guess if you cannot find an original one, which are there, I've seen few offers, you have to kind of makeshift something in this manner. So for pressing this bearing in, you have to press on the outer bearing run, right? So not to put the strain on the rollers. There was a special service tool for it. I've just used part of this generic set for pressing different bushings and bearings. So here goes the woodruff key, and you actually have to place the next elements against the cover on the left side, because I can see here on the top you got your speedometer gear housing, and it will just not pass through it. So you have to wiggle it a bit to find the key. Yeah, and that's it. So there were two types of this speedometer gear here. You can see these yellow plastic ones. This one is actually one part. All right, so time for pressing the bearing in. So that's pretty important step, because the position of it is actually very important when it comes to the meshing the pinion with pinion ring gear, and it has to be very precise. There is of course, special service tool to measure this. I will show that later. And here's the most important part in this whole overhaul: how deep to press the pinion shaft. It's actually very easy when you have the special service tool that Saab technicians had. If you don't, fortunately, the service manual also puts the dimensions of it. And the most important dimension, it's not really visible, but that's the scan I've got. So the most important dimension here is the dimension from the middle of the axle to top of this tool, it is 60.94 millimeters from the plane on which those 2 points pointed here are, so the middle of the bearing, to the surface of the pinion shaft here. It has to be 60.94 millimeters. And unfortunately I haven't recorded this, but I've used the straight edge V4 caliper depth gauge to measure it roughly to the right distance, and then I've used V4 micrometer depth gauge. You have to go back and forth, so you measure it. If it's too proud, you have to assemble the jig again, press it a bit, and so on. You can also control this by placing dial gauge on the back of the shaft, and if you, for example, if you know you have to press 3 millimeters more, you just have to observe how the shaft goes with your gauge there. And yeah, the next bearing, this was actually the one of the technical problems with the overhaul here, was to replicate those bearings. That's on the back of the pinion shaft. It had this snap ring, so the snap ring groove I had to machine on. Well, it was ground actually on this bearing, and I'm just reusing the snap ring from the previous bearing, which, by the way, wasn't in a bad shape. I just like tried this exercise of replicating this just in case in the future I will need it or need more of them. That's the piston ring tool, and yeah, it actually went pretty nicely on it. So this position of this snap ring is pretty critical because it basically sets how deep into kind of inside of the gearbox the pinion shaft goes and how it will mesh with pinion ring gear. So that's the tricky part. Don't forget the washer that goes there. And as you can see here, the critical part here is to press on the outside and the inside runs of the bearing at the same time, so you will not put the strain on the bearing balls. And on the other side, the pinion shaft has this kind of detent where you put the screw on the other side to just position it. All right, so I'm just putting the next bearing in. There was, of course, special tool for it, but it will go like this if you just smash it in with a hammer. And it should set. There is a snap ring, like a wire ring. Of course, take out the seals if the bearings you've got them, so you will have your oil flow. It's better to do it once it's get pressed in, just because when you're handling it, something might get into it. Don't worry about the grease; it will get dissolved in oil. All right, so the next bearing already pressed in. Here I'm just wondering how it all went originally. So there's another snap ring. You place after you press this bearing in. So you got this spacer, which has a detent, which you will see the snap ring eyes will go in. There's a spacer. I had to check here once again if that's correct order. You have to put all the gears and the synchronizer together and then just put the shaft in. So pressing this in, you put a strain on a bearing. It actually goes to the aluminum casing, so there's not really a big force there, but just bear this in mind, rather not to repeat this. So just visually check the bearing position, not to go crazy with pushing it in. Once you get the other bearing and tight the nut, it will pull it into the right position. Its position is not that critical, but just remember not to push it too far, so you won't have to push it out again. So that's a replacement bearing for the second end. One of them, I believe, actually for this shaft, originally was the C4, but I couldn't find one. And C3 and C4, the tolerances of the inside play, they are actually overlapping. So I just took the C3. So two of them that are on the back side are actually the C3 with snap ring. So this position of the snap ring will also determine how far those stick out. That's the reverse gear. Remember to put the spacer washer here and the snap ring. They go outside. And the way this gear goes in, the machined surface goes against the brake. So it will go, this part will go kind of like outside, so towards the pinion ring gear. Not really showing here what's going on, but I'm just trying to tighten it a little bit. yeah, you can hear it. And I'm pressing it with a screw from the external side of the gearbox. This is actually a pretty easy step. You just press it till it gets firmly set against the snap ring on the bearing, and that's it. The woodroof key, you have to slide it from the front of it. It is a bit tricky, it's a constrained space, but just turn it around so you get it aligned. Then you can slide it in. The friction brake here, so this sheet metal gear, you can see here I'm trying to bend its inside parts out. Is fitted on a counter shaft, so it's eliminating the backlash, so the gearbox is more quiet. You have to bend it kind of, so the distance between the clearance between counter shaft gear and the primary shaft bearing is at least half millimeter there. Otherwise you will have to use the spacer under the distance between the surfaces of this friction wheel has to be set between 3.7 to 4 millimeters. So that's why I was bending the inside lobes. Here it is. I have to make this crow's foot wrench just out of the cheapest one I could find in a supermarket. So yeah, here you go. You have to engage two gears at the same time, so like a third and a first, just by sliding the synchronizers, so they effectively getting jammed, and you can just tighten the this nut. You have to kind of have like a 4 hands to do it. Originally this jig also had kind of like a small stand from that side that I'm just trying to put some shims so it's not wiggling. Kind of worked. as many of aspects of this gearbox rely on the really precise position of its elements, which is established by how you press and then tighten the elements. So you can see here I'm struggling a bit to click the wrench. And of course with the crow's foot. And your torque wrench, you have to put it 90 degrees to the side, otherwise you're just lengthening the arm, and it's not you don't torque it to this to the right value. All right, so that's done, and now it's time to torque the back side. Okay, so here's for a pinion shaft tightening procedure. So the pinion shaft nut initially has to be tightened with 90 feet-pounds or 120 Newton meters, then back it off and retighten it with 45 foot-pounds or 60 Newton meters. The primary shaft nut has to be tightened with 35 foot-pounds or 50 Newton meters. This will put all their positions in the right place. Alright, that's about it for this one. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one. Bye.